The phone hits the wall like a gunshot. Plaster dust explodes in a tiny cloud. He screams my name, a sound ripped raw from his throat, full of disbelief and a sudden, violent panic I've never heard before. Not anger, not the controlled irritation he usually aims at me. This is pure animal terror. He stands there, chest heaving, eyes wide and wild, staring at the shattered screen of his phone lying amongst the debris. On the screen, before it went dark, was my post. The timeline. Everything.
Leid bara.
He lunges towards me, not reaching out, but coiling back like he's about to strike. "What did you do?" he hisses, the scream replaced by a venomous whisper that sends a shiver down my spine, colder than any shout. His face is a mask of disbelief turning rapidly into fury. He thought he was untouchable. He thought I was clueless. He thought I was weak. The air in the room is thick, heavy. It smells like stale coffee, and his fear. My heart is a steady drum in my chest, calm. Too calm, maybe. Like the quiet just before a storm breaks. I don't flinch. I don't back away. I just stand there, watching the empire of his lies crumble in his eyes. It wasn't just a post. It was a declaration of war. And he was the first casualty. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. We built this life brick by brick. Or at least I thought we did. It wasn't a mansion, not even close, just a comfortable house on a quiet street, the kind of place where sprinklers hum on summer evenings and kids leave bikes on the lawn. It was supposed to be our safe harbor. My harbor anyway. I poured everything into it. My time, my energy, my dreams of a future that felt solid, reliable. I liked routine. I liked knowing where things stood. I liked the quiet rhythm of a life shared. I wasn't asking for fireworks every day, just a steady flame. He was different, always a little restless, always looking over the horizon. I mistook it for ambition.
For drive.
Maybe it was, back then. In the beginning, he was exciting. All sharp edges and grand ideas. He made me feel seen. Like I wasn't just blending into the background of my own life. He promised forever, not with flowery words, but with the way he looked at me. Like I was the only thing that made sense in his complicated world. We married young. Not too young to know what we were doing, but young enough to believe love could conquer anything. I believed it with every fiber of my being. I saw the potential in him, the good heart buried beneath the ambition. I thought my steadiness could be his anchor. I thought his fire could keep me warm.
It was a partnership.
An unspoken agreement to build something together, something that would last. My desire was simple: a family, a home filled with laughter, a partner who saw me, truly saw me, even when the years softened the sharp edges we started with. I wanted the comfort of shared silence, the ease of knowing you are unconditionally loved. Life settled into a pattern. Work, home, dinners, quiet evenings. There were arguments, of course. Whose turn was it to clean the bathroom? Why did you spend that much on groceries? Small, insignificant things that dissolved into laughter or tired apologies. We talked about the future. About kids, eventually. About renovating the kitchen. Normal things. I felt secure. Content. Maybe a little complacent. I look back now and see how blind I was. How desperately I wanted to believe in the picture I'd painted. The canvas was perfect in my mind. I didn't see the cracks forming beneath the surface. The first crack was barely noticeable. A late night at the office. Then another. And another. He was working hard, he said. Big project. Needs his full attention. It made sense. He was ambitious. That's what I loved about him. I brought him dinner sometimes, sat in the quiet office watching him hunched over his computer, the blue light reflecting in his tired eyes. He'd smile, grateful. Kiss my forehead. Tell me I was the best. I bought it. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband. My rock. My forever. Then came the phone. Always with him. Always on silent. He'd carry it even to the bathroom. A low buzz from his pocket would send a flicker of something across his face. Not fear, not yet, but a kind of heightened awareness, like a radar pinged somewhere far off. He'd answer calls in hushed tones, walking out of the room. Text messages were read quickly, deleted faster. He said it was client confidentiality. Sensitive deals. The little things added up. A new shirt I didn't recognize. A faint scent of perfume that wasn't mine. A sudden, unexplained trip out of town for a conference he'd never mentioned before. I'd ask. He'd have an answer. Always smooth. Plausible.
Too plausible, maybe.
He was a good liar. I just didn't know it yet. The gut feeling started as a faint flutter, like a trapped bird in my chest. I'd dismiss it. Stress. Too much coffee. My imagination running wild. I didn't want to be that wife. The paranoid one. The one who didn't trust her husband. Trust was the foundation, wasn't it? You chip away at that, and the whole structure collapses. One evening, he left his phone on the kitchen counter. A miracle. I walked past it, felt that familiar flutter of unease. Just check, the little voice whispered. Just make sure you're not crazy. My hand hovered over the screen.
No.
I couldn't. That was crossing a line. A line you can't uncross. I told myself that trust was earned, and he had earned mine. Hadn't he? He came back in, picked up the phone, his movements just a fraction too casual. Almost forgot this, he said, a small, tight smile on his face. The air felt heavier after that, like something unspoken hung between us, suffocating. The sleepless nights became routine. I'd lie awake next to his quiet, steady breathing, my mind racing. Every late night, every hushed call, every deleted text replayed in my head. I tried to talk to him. Are you okay? I'd ask, trying to keep my voice light. You seem distant, he'd brush it off.
Tired.
Work stress. Nothing to worry about. His eyes would meet mine, and for a second, I'd almost believe him. Almost. I started looking for proof, not intentionally at first. More like I couldn't help but see things. A receipt for dinner for two at a restaurant I'd never been to. He said it was a client lunch. A new app on his phone disguised as something else. I clicked it once, accidentally. It was empty, wiped clean. My suspicion grew, a dark, persistent vine twisting around my heart. He became defensive. Any question, any innocent inquiry about his day, felt like an interrogation to him. Why are you asking so many questions? He'd snap. Don't you trust me? The irony of that question was a bitter pill. Don't I trust him? The man who is building a wall of secrets around himself, brick by careful brick. I started to doubt my own sanity. Was I making this up? Was I projecting my own insecurities onto him? Gaslighting wasn't a word I used back then, but I felt its effects. He made me feel unreasonable, suspicious, like I was the problem. The trapped bird in my chest was fluttering harder now, desperate to escape. I confided in a friend, cautiously. Just hinted that things felt off. She was kind, listened patiently. Said maybe I was overthinking it. Men get busy. Work takes over. It's probably nothing. Her gentle reassurance felt like a betrayal, even though it wasn't. It just reinforced my isolation. I couldn't tell anyone the depth of my fear, the icy grip of suspicion that was becoming my constant companion. The attempts to talk to him became arguments. I'd approach him, my voice trembling slightly, trying to express my unease. He'd shut down. Or explode. His anger felt disproportionate, a shield to hide something else. You're being ridiculous, he'd say, his voice cold. I'm working myself to the bone for us, and this is the thanks I get? You accusing me of what? He never finished the sentence.
He didn't have to.
We both knew what hung in the air between us. I started sleeping in the guest room. It wasn't a conscious decision at first, just easier than lying next to him, pretending to be asleep while my mind screamed. The distance between our bodies was a physical manifestation of the growing chasm between us. The house felt too big, too quiet. His side of the bed remained smooth, uncreased, a stark reminder of the nights he wasn't just working late. The other woman became less of a ghost and more of a shadow. I saw her once, from a distance, leaving his office building late at night. She was young, pretty, laughing at something he said. He touched her arm lightly as she turned away. It was a small gesture, but it landed like a punch. My breath caught in my throat. I ducked behind a parked car, my heart hammering against my ribs. He didn't see me. He just stood there for a moment, watching her go, a soft, unguarded look on his face I hadn't seen directed at me in months. That look, it was devastating. It confirmed everything. I drove home on autopilot, the world blurry through a veil of unshed tears. I unlocked the front door, stepped into the silent house, and the pretense finally shattered. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid.
He was doing this.
He was breaking us. He was breaking me. The pain was physical, a sharp, searing ache in my chest. It felt like grief, profound and absolute. Grief for the future I thought we had, for the man I thought he was, for the trust that was now irrevocably broken. I curled up on the living room floor, the silence of the house amplifying the storm raging inside me. Every memory, every promise, every shared laugh was now tainted, seen through the lens of his betrayal. How long had this been going on? How many times had he lied to my face? How could he? This wasn't just a mistake. This felt deliberate. A calculated deception. The slow unraveling of my marriage wasn't just happening to me, it was being orchestrated. By him. The man I loved. The man I had built my life around. I felt like I was drowning. The weight of the secret, his secret, was crushing me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I was lost in a sea of pain and confusion. Everything seemed hopeless. What was I supposed to do? Confront him and be met with more lies, more gaslighting? Leave and lose everything? Stay and pretend, living a lie within a lie? The thought of continuing like this was unbearable. I sat there for a long time, the darkness of the room matching the darkness in my soul. The trapped bird was no longer fluttering. It was still, silent.
Exhausted.
I was at my lowest point. Everything I believed in, everything I thought was real, had been systematically dismantled by the person I trusted the most. I felt utterly alone, adrift in the wreckage of my life. And then something shifted. Slow at first, like the tide beginning to turn. The exhaustion remained, but beneath it, a spark ignited. A cold, hard spark. What was I doing? Sitting here, letting him destroy me? Letting his lies define my reality? Letting him win?
No.
The pain was still there, a dull ache now, but the confusion began to recede, replaced by a chilling clarity. He thought I was weak. He thought I would crumble. He thought he could get away with this. He was wrong. This wasn't about saving the marriage anymore. That ship had sailed, sunk by his deceit. This was about saving me, about reclaiming my dignity, about showing him that I wasn't some naive fool he could walk all over. This was about justice. My kind of justice. The trapped bird in my chest stirred, not with panic, but with a fierce, rising determination. The sorrow was still there, a deep well, but it was no longer paralyzing. It was fuel. I wouldn't confront him seeking truth or remorse. I wouldn't beg or plead. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me broken. Instead, I would gather my strength. I would gather evidence. And I would wait. The path forward was suddenly, terrifyingly clear. I would fight back. Not with emotion, not with tears, but with cold, calculated action. He had used my trust, my love, my stability against me. Now, I would use his arrogance, his certainty of my ignorance, against him. The decision solidified in the quiet darkness. I wouldn't just leave. I would leave on my own terms. And I would make sure he understood the cost of his betrayal. The anger was a steady flame now, burning away the last vestiges of hurt and doubt. I stood up, the floor cold beneath my feet. The house was still silent, but it felt different now. It felt like a battlefield. And I was no longer the victim. I was the strategist. I started quietly, methodically. I wasn't looking for emotional closure. I was building a case, a comprehensive, undeniable record of his deceit. Every late night, every business trip, every suspicious text message, every unexplained expense. I became a ghost in my own home, moving silently, watching, listening. My eyes were wide open now. I saw everything. I learned how to access his phone records, his email, his cloud storage. It wasn't difficult. His passwords were depressingly predictable, variations of things he thought were clever or significant to us, back when us meant something to him. The first time I logged into his email, my hands trembled. It felt like an invasion. But the feeling passed quickly, replaced by a cold resolve. He had invaded my life, my trust, my future. This was self-preservation. This was war. The amount of information was staggering. Years of lies. Not just the one woman, but others too. Though she was clearly the main one, the big project, their messages were sickeningly sweet, full of inside jokes and plans for a future that explicitly excluded me. They talked about me sometimes, dismissively, calling me naive, predictable. It hurt, a sharp, unexpected pang amidst the numbness. But mostly, it just fueled my determination. He really thought I was this oblivious fool. I meticulously copied everything. Emails, texts, call logs, photos he thought were private, calendar entries with coded names or vague descriptions that I could now decode. I cross-referenced dates, times, locations. I found hotel bookings, restaurant reservations, even flight details for trips he claimed were solo business travel. The paper trail was damning. It wasn't just proof, it was a story. A detailed, step-by-step account of his betrayal. I created spreadsheets, folders, backup copies stored in multiple secure locations he would never find. I felt like a detective in my own life, uncovering a conspiracy that went deeper than I could have imagined. The emotional detachment was necessary. I couldn't afford to feel the pain with every discovery. I compartmentalized. The data was just data. Numbers, dates, words. The feelings would come later. While I built my case, I also started planning my exit. Not just packing a bag and leaving, but dismantling my life from his, piece by careful piece. I consulted with a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who listened patiently to my story. When I showed her the evidence I'd already gathered, her eyebrows shot up. "You've been busy," she said, a hint of admiration in her voice. She explained my options, the legal landscape, what I could expect. She helped me understand how to protect myself financially. I opened a new bank account he didn't know about, redirected my salary, secured credit cards in my name only. I also started talking carefully. Not about the affair yet, but about the stress of the marriage, the feeling of growing apart. I planted seeds with friends, with a few trusted family members. Not to gossip, but to lay the groundwork. So when the truth came out, they wouldn't be blindsided. They would see my side of the story, the long, difficult journey that led me to this point. He remained oblivious. He was so caught up in his double life, so convinced of his own cleverness, that he didn't notice my transformation. He saw me as the quiet, unassuming wife, easily fooled, easily managed. He saw my silence as ignorance, not strategy. He saw my detachment as depression, not preparation. Let him think that. His underestimation was my greatest weapon. The financial details were particularly galling. He was spending significant amounts of money on her. Trips, gifts, dinners. Money that was supposed to be for our future. Money I had contributed to. Seeing the financial cost of his betrayal added another layer to my anger. It wasn't just emotional and personal, it was a theft. A theft of my time, my love, my future, and my financial security. I felt a sense of cold power growing within me. It wasn't a pleasant feeling, exactly, more like a heavy, tempered steel. I was no longer the crying woman on the floor. I was a force. Quiet, invisible, but powerful. Every file I saved, every date I cross-referenced, felt like another link in the chain I was building around him. The deepening crisis wasn't about things falling apart anymore, because they were already broken. It was about the overwhelming weight of what I had discovered. The sheer scale of the deception was breathtaking. It wasn't a brief lapse in judgment. It was a parallel life, meticulously constructed and maintained for years. Friends, colleagues, maybe even some of his family members had likely known or suspected and said nothing. The feeling of being surrounded by a conspiracy of silence was suffocating. Every day felt like walking through a minefield. I had to maintain the facade of normalcy, act like I didn't know, didn't see the lies unfolding around me. The effort was exhausting. Smiling, making small talk, sharing a meal while knowing the full extent of his deceit felt like performing in a twisted play where only I knew the tragic ending. The loneliness was immense. I was living with a stranger, a man who had betrayed me in the most fundamental way, and I couldn't drop the act. I wanted to scream, to shatter the illusion, but I knew it wasn't time yet. Not until everything was in place. I felt like a ghost in my own life, watching from the outside as the remnants of my marriage played out like a dark comedy. His arrogance grew. He was bolder now, less careful. He'd take calls from her in front of me, referring to her as a client or colleague with a smirk he didn't even try to hide anymore. He thought he had won. He thought I was completely fooled, lost in my own misery. He saw my quietness as defeat. It was infuriating. And it was perfect. Let him underestimate me. Let him believe I was harmless. There were moments of intense emotional pain. Seeing a photo of them together, happy, in a place we'd talked about visiting. Reading a message where he described me in cruel, dismissive terms. These moments would hit me like physical blows, shattering my carefully constructed detachment. I'd retreat to the guest room, or lock myself in the bathroom, tears streaming down my face, the cold steel resolve wavering under the weight of pure, raw hurt. But each time, the anger would return, stronger. How dare he? How dare he do this and think he could get away with it? How dare he belittle me? He had taken so much, but he would not take my spirit. He would not leave me broken and destitute while he rode off into the sunset with his new life. The deepening crisis was also about the fear. Fear of the unknown future. Fear of the confrontation. Fear of the legal battle ahead. Fear of being alone. But beneath the fear was a growing core of strength, forged in the fires of betrayal. I had faced the worst and survived. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I would get through this. And I would not go quietly. The vast collection of evidence, the detailed timeline I had meticulously compiled, felt like a weapon waiting to be deployed. It was more than just proof of an affair. It was proof of a pattern of deception, financial misconduct related to his lies, and emotional abuse through gaslighting. This wasn't just about my broken heart anymore. It was about reclaiming my story, my financial stability, and my future. The turning point wasn't a sudden epiphany, but the culmination of months of pain, planning, and quiet observation. I looked at the finished timeline, scrolling through years of documented lies, coded messages, and secret rendezvous. It was a clinical, brutal account of the slow death of my marriage, authored by my husband. And I knew exactly what I had to do with it. The initial thought was simple exposure, sending it to friends, family. But that felt too small, too personal. It would cause chaos, hurt people, but it wouldn't hit him where it really counted. His reputation, his professional standing, his carefully curated image of success and respectability. He cared more about that than he did about my feelings, or maybe even his mistress's feelings in the end. My lawyer had explained the legal implications of the evidence, how it could impact asset division, potentially even spousal support, depending on the jurisdiction and the specific details of his financial deception. But she also cautioned against anything that could be seen as harassment or defamation. I had to be smart. The plot twist wasn't going to be about public shaming for shaming's sake. It had to serve a larger purpose. It had to be the catalyst for his complete undoing, something he couldn't recover from, something that allowed me to not just survive, but thrive. I realized the timeline itself wasn't the final weapon. It was the fuse, the ignition switch. What if the public exposure didn't just embarrass him, but triggered something else? Something he hadn't prepared for, because he was only thinking about managing the personal fallout. I had noticed a recurring theme in his emails and texts with his mistress and business associates. He was on the verge of a major deal, a partnership that would significantly elevate his career and financial status. This deal hinged on his reputation, his trustworthiness, his image as a stable, reliable partner. Any hint of scandal, of a chaotic personal life, of dishonesty, it could jeopardize everything. And he was bound by several non-disclosure agreements and clauses in his business contracts that required him to maintain a certain level of personal and professional conduct, precisely to protect the interests of his partners and investors. Public scandal, particularly one involving prolonged deception and potential financial impropriety, like using company resources or travel for the affair, which I had evidence of, could constitute a breach. That was it. The public timeline wasn't just revealing the affair to our social circle. It was broadcasting his fundamental dishonesty to the professional world that mattered most to him. It was proof that he was reckless, untrustworthy, and fundamentally compromised. My strategy crystallized. I would make the timeline public, yes, but not just anywhere. I would post it online, on a platform where it would gain maximum visibility, a platform where mutual acquaintances, professional contacts, and potential business partners were likely to see it. I would frame it not as a personal sob story, but as a factual account of documented events. The truth, laid bare, would be devastating enough. But that wasn't the twist itself. The twist was the timing and what I did before I posted. I didn't just compile the evidence. I packaged it. Legally. I worked with my lawyer to prepare legal documents, a divorce petition citing adultery and financial misconduct, a detailed financial claim based on the resources he'd squandered on the affair, and a formal complaint to the relevant professional body outlining his unethical behavior and the breach of conduct clauses, backed by irrefutable evidence. These documents were ready to be filed, waiting. The timeline post would be the signal. The moment it went live, my lawyer would simultaneously file the legal documents. He would be blindsided on two fronts: the public humiliation he couldn't control, and the legal onslaught he hadn't anticipated, couldn't prepare for, and couldn't lie his way out of because the evidence was already in the system, tied to the public record. He thought my only recourse was emotional devastation or a private, messy divorce negotiation where he could use my presumed weakness against me. He thought I'd fold under pressure. He never imagined I would turn his own recklessness into the mechanism of his downfall, using the very public sphere he courted for his business success to expose his deepest failures and trigger legal consequences he couldn't escape. The timeline was the spark, igniting a perfectly timed, legally devastating firestorm. The trap was set, and he was about to walk directly into it. The day I chose was significant. A Monday morning, the start of the work week, the busiest time for his industry. The timeline I had created was simple, factual. Just dates, times, locations, brief descriptions of events backed by the evidence I held. I didn't add commentary, didn't express emotion. The facts were damning enough. I sat at my computer, the cursor hovering over the publish button. My heart pounded, not with fear anymore, but with a potent mix of adrenaline and cold resolve. This was it, the culmination of months of silent work. My fingers trembled slightly as I clicked. The timeline went live. My phone rang almost instantly. His name flashed on the screen. I didn't answer. I watched the likes, the shares, the comments roll in on the platform. It spread like wildfire. People who knew us, people who knew him, strangers. The silence was broken. The truth was out. He called again, and again. Then the messages started. Furious, frantic, disbelieving. What the hell did you do? Take it down now. You'll regret this. I read them, my face expressionless. His panic was palpable, even through the screen. He was seeing the immediate, public fallout. Then he was home. He burst through the front door, his tie askew, his face pale and contorted with rage and panic. He looked wild, cornered. He saw me, calm, standing in the living room. That's when he screamed my name, the sound that had started this story. That's when he threw his phone, watching his digital world shatter like the screen. He lunged towards me, breathing hard. "What did you do?" he hissed, the fury replacing the terror for a second. "How could you? You psycho bitch." I didn't raise my voice. My tone was flat, colder than ice. "I told the truth," I said. He laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "The truth? You want to talk about the truth? You think this is going to hurt me? You've just made yourself look like a bitter, crazy woman." He took a step closer, his eyes narrowed, full of contempt. He thought he could still bully me, gaslight me, control the narrative. He thought the online post was the extent of it. "Is that what you think?" I asked, a small, dangerous smile playing on my lips. "That this is just about embarrassing you? About making you look bad online?" He paused, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. My calmness was throwing him off. "Because," I continued, my voice gaining a quiet strength, "while you were busy screaming about a social media post, my lawyer was busy filing the divorce papers, citing adultery and financial misconduct, with all the evidence you never thought I'd find." His eyes widened. The color drained from his face completely. "And," I added, taking a step towards him now, closing the distance he'd expected me to run from, "a formal complaint to your professional body. With documented proof of your breaches of conduct, your misuse of company resources, the whole sordid timeline. You thought I was sitting around crying? While you were building your little parallel life, I was building a case. An ironclad case." He stumbled back as if I had struck him. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He looked from me to the shattered phone, then back to me, his world collapsing around him in real time. "This," I said, gesturing around the room, "all of it, the life you built on lies, is gone. Not because I posted a timeline online, but because that post was the trigger, the signal to file everything. To make sure the truth wasn't just public, but legally binding. You didn't think I'd find out. And you certainly never thought I'd use what I found to dismantle your entire world, professionally and financially, with the law as my witness." He looked utterly blindsided. The arrogance was gone, replaced by naked, staggering defeat. He hadn't just underestimated me. He hadn't even seen the battlefield I was preparing. He was so focused on the personal drama, he missed the calculated, strategic strike that would cost him everything. His scream wasn't just about the timeline anymore. It was the sound of his carefully constructed life exploding. The silence that followed his initial outburst was deafening. He just stood there, staring at me, his chest still heaving, but the fury replaced by a blank, disbelieving shock. The color was slowly returning to his face, but it was the flush of humiliation and dawning horror, not rage. He looked smaller, suddenly. Deflated. The sharp edges I'd once admired seemed to have dissolved, leaving behind something soft and pathetic. He tried to speak, a guttural sound escaping his lips, but the words wouldn't form. He reached for the wall, steadying himself, his hand leaving a dusty smear where the phone had hit.
It's
defamation," he finally choked out, his voice hoarse. A weak attempt to regain some control, some footing in this new, terrifying reality. I almost smiled. "Is it?" I asked, my voice still level. "Or is it simply presenting documented facts? Dates, times, locations? Things easily verifiable through phone records, emails, travel bookings? Things you provided the evidence for, piece by piece, over the years? I didn't invent anything. I just organized it." He recoiled again, the mention of the evidence hitting him hard. He'd seen the timeline, the summary, but he hadn't seen the mountain of proof I held. "The complaint to the board," he whispered, his voice barely audible. His professional fear was clearly paramount now. The public personal humiliation was bad, but this could end him. "They take breaches of conduct seriously," I confirmed, my tone matter-of-fact. "Especially when there's clear evidence of dishonesty and potential misuse of company resources." Turns out, those business trips weren't just about meetings. He sank onto the nearest chair, his face buried in his hands. He didn't rage anymore. He didn't scream. The fight had drained out of him the moment he understood the scale of what I had done and how thoroughly I had prepared. He had thought this was a skirmish he could win with lies and bluster. He hadn't realized I was playing a different game entirely. The aftermath wasn't instantaneous. The divorce proceedings were messy, as expected, but the evidence I had was insurmountable. His attempts to deny or deflect were met with a quiet presentation of facts, dates, and documents. The timeline wasn't just online. It was Exhibit A in court. The complaint to the professional body led to an investigation, the outcome of which was predictable given the evidence. His reputation was in tatters. The big deal he was working on? It collapsed. His partners wanted nothing to do with the scandal. Watching his public and professional life implode felt complicated. There was vindication, yes. A deep, bone-weary satisfaction in seeing justice served, in knowing he couldn't lie his way out of this. He had thought I was nothing, and I had become the architect of his undoing.
But there was also sadness.
Profound sadness for the years lost, for the love that had been so carelessly discarded, for the future I had mourned. Winning felt like surviving a brutal war. You're still standing, but the landscape is scarred, and you carry the weight of what you've been through. I rebuilt my life, brick by careful brick. This time, the foundation was laid by me, for me. It wasn't easy. There were days the sadness threatened to swallow me whole. Days the anger flared, sharp and hot. But I kept going. I had proven my strength to myself, and that was a victory no one could take away. He lost a lot. His career, his reputation, a significant portion of his assets. The Mistress? She disappeared from the picture quickly once the scandal erupted and his financial situation changed. Turns out, her interest was less about love and more about the lifestyle his perceived success provided. Another layer of poetic justice, I suppose. I learned that trust is a gift, not a given. That your intuition is often wiser than your desire to believe a comfortable lie. And that sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't loud or violent, but quiet, strategic, and utterly relentless. He thought I'd never find out, but I did. And when I turned his world inside out, he screamed. And I finally felt silent, cold peace. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.